Welcome to the Rocking Your Role show with me, Jenny Garrett, executive coach and author. As you know, every week we speak to women in business, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Trisha Proud. She will tell you all about what she does, but I can tell you one thing: we're going to get lots of useful nuggets of experience and information that will help you with your business. Welcome, Trisha. How are you?
Thank you, Jenny. I'm great and really looking forward to our chat. And I hope that I can share some of the things that I've learned through setting up and running my own business.
Well, I know you'll be able to. We met actually on social media, didn't we?
You did indeed.
And I've just been amazed by how prolific you are, how much you give in terms of your
Oh,
insights,
thank you.
and the fact that you're always really giving. So I know that you'll give to our viewers and our listeners today.
Oh, thank you. I hope so.
Definitely, definitely. So tell us a bit about you and what you do, please.
Okay. Well, a sort of thumbnail sketch of me is that after university, I had quite a lengthy career in the catering and hospitality business, primarily in the contracted services. And then one day you get that magic phone call from a headhunter, which is always very ego stroking, sort of say, wouldn't you like to be a client?
Mm.
And so I thought, well, yeah, when you're in contracting, that's what everybody wants to aspire to. So I went off and I joined the Automobile Association, where I stayed for 12 years, and I ended up being their property FM director. So I
Ah,
moved from the catering and hospitality into the FM sector. And then as the years rolled by, a couple of chief executives approached me and sort of said they wanted me to come back into the contracting sector, which I did for about 7 years after that. And I just sort of woke up one morning and thought, you know what? I don't want to work corporately anymore.
mm,
So I also didn't. This sounds awful. It's not meant to be. For any aspiring consultants out there, please don't be offended by this. But I just thought, I just don't want to be another consultant.
mm.
And the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning and motivates me is people, as
Right.
hopefully you have picked up through my sort of social media
Yes.
interactions. And so I thought, do you know what? I'm going to do something slightly different. I'm going to set up a consultancy using all my background and skills and expertise, but also the thing that I really love, and obviously I have reached a certain age, like a good wine, darling, like a good wine. Where I am at that stage that I really do enjoy giving stuff back. So I
Yes.
have a sort of a training and mentoring arm of my business.
Ah.
So that's what my business primarily is. I consult on property, FM, catering, hospitality, just general business, from business re-engineering, processes, tenders, that sort of stuff. But I also do lots of training, primarily management training, all the standard stuff, strategic planning, project management, all the standard management programs, but also mentoring and coaching. Um, which I absolutely love. So I've
Wow.
been doing that now for 7 years. I've been running my business now.
What an amazing journey. I want to know more about how you got headhunted. It seems like people found you and singled you out for opportunities. Why do you think that was?
Um, well, it's like all business sectors. I think they're quite sort of myopic, and they're quite small in their own elements.
Hmm.
And I think not in a big-headed way, but I think that my name was known. I'd been around the industry for some time, and the AA were looking for somebody to, head up certain departments, and my name came into play. And I think that's why they approached me.
Yes, yeah. But I think you're being very modest because your name doesn't come into play if you're not doing a very good job, does it?
Well, yes, and well, obviously, when I was in contracting, I mean, I worked for one contractor, and I never lost. I worked for them for 7 years.
Mm.
The magic of seven again.
Yes.
And at that time, I was headhunted, and I'd never lost a contract in 7 years, which is
Wow.
quite unheard of.
Yes.
So I'm big into people. I'm big into client relationships, all of that sort of stuff. So getting the best out of your teams that work with you, all of that sort of stuff. And I think that's, as you say, that's what people know.
Yes, absolutely. So great. So that was the thing,
Yeah,
they knew that you were going to keep hold of the clients, have good relationships, make things work, and that you delivered. And they
yeah.
knew that about you. Yes.
Well, I think the other thing was that, of course, the AA at the time used to employ people from the armed services, dare I say, primarily men. And,
Right.
and if I can use a sort of well-used phrase, I was a bit gobsmacked when they offered me the post because I
Yes.
never thought that they'd employ a woman in such a senior role.
Gosh.
And for the time, probably not so much today, but for the time, that was really, really unusual. I mean, they were a bit sort of grey, pale, and stale, in the form.
Right.
We had to give them a bit of a shake-up.
Yes. Yeah. I bet you
Maybe that's
did.
what they liked.
Yes.
Maybe
Yeah.
they liked. Maybe they knew they needed that.
Mm. So you were up for the challenge as well.
I was up for the challenge, and in actual fact, the guy that I was working for at the time, which was a small proprietor-owned contractor, really convinced me not to do it. And he said, "Oh, they're very sort of civil service, and oh, you're a doer, and all of these things." And that's exactly, Jenny, what I said to him.
Yes.
But it's the challenge that I relish.
Ah, brilliant.
It's exactly what I said to him.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing how people, I think well-meaning people often sort of try and put you off. The thing that
Yeah.
could be the growth could be a real growth area for you or something that you could excel in. And yeah, I mean, their heart's in the right place generally, and I think their intention is right. And it's interesting sometimes how not to be swayed by that. How do you not be swayed
Well,
by that?
yes, and maybe for your viewers, this is quite
Mm.
interesting because I was a single mum at the time,
Ah,
two
right.
young daughters,
Mm.
and the company I was working for gave me a lovely, bright red BMW company car, etc.,
Mm.
etc. So I had all the trappings and trimmings,
Yes.
and I was going to this job that was okay paid, but
Mm.
it was, it was a risk, and it didn't come with a nice big flashy red car either.
Right. Gosh.
So, there is sometimes you have to look beyond that. And I was thinking about what I was going to do, the skills and techniques that I was going to pick up, and just the opportunities that might go beyond. And for me, that has stood the test of time because obviously now, when I'm doing my consultancy, particularly, and when I'm doing my training, that is a real USP for me
Right.
to be able to say that I've been a service provider and a client. People are so interested in that.
Yes, you've got that 360-degree view on
Yeah,
everything.
absolutely right.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So your clients are primarily in catering and hospitality and facilities management, is that right?
Yes, but some big names that you
Mm,
would recognise, people like, Virgin Media,
right.
P, Jamie Oliver's 15 Foundation, most of the FM companies. Some of my training does branch out from that. So I've done training in the retail sector, lots of hotels, obviously. I also do training for some charities for Action for Blind People, RNRB,
Right.
the RNLI. I've also worked with them. So yes, it's quite diverse. It really
Yeah.
is quite diverse, and I like that. And of course, the management training can go across any business because they're so transferable. The skills that you pick up in your management training are just so transferable.
Brilliant, yeah. So very impressive to hear the sort of people that you're working with and the diversity and also the way you sort of worked your way up with getting as much knowledge as you can and quite extensive knowledge in order to be in this position right now. And I think that's always one of the things to remember. I think it's a real challenge when I hear about 15-year-old, well, maybe 16-year-olds leaving school and wanting to start a business, and I think you haven't
Mm.
quite got you haven't got that apprenticeship behind you, you haven't got those skills, that experience that working in an organization can really teach you. So I think it's a good springboard into something else, but quite hard if you haven't got that foundation in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, experience is something you physically cannot buy.
No.
And I know when I set up in business, I thought, you know what, I'm going to stick to what I know and what I'm good at.
Mm.
And I think it's interesting that you mentioned that the sort of 15, 16-year-olds leaving school, because I have this theory that I often share in my training sessions. And I think that when you first set out on a career, you do want to be all things to all men, young and thrusting, I call it. You do. You
Say
probably
thrusting again for me.
but you do,
Yes.
I readily admit that when I started out on my career, I wanted to be all things to all men and absolutely brilliant at everything. And then I think you get to sort of a middle stage of your career when even in a darkened room, even if you don't admit it to your friends and colleagues, you know what you're good at and you know what you're not so good at.
Yes.
And then, dare I say it, and you're not there yet, Jenny, but when you get to my stage, darling, you know what you're good at, but more importantly, you know what you don't want to be good at.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think, when I reached that stage, I thought, you know what, maybe I could do this, that, and the other, but do I want to be good at that? No. I want to be passionate about the things that I know I'm good at and that I really do feel a buzz when I'm getting out of bed in the morning. And that's for me, for all the entrepreneurs out there, is where you should start.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. That's
useful, but
yeah, most
how it works
definitely.
for me.
Yes, and definitely not just chasing everything, because I think that that you sort of
Yes.
spread yourself too thin, wear
Then,
yourself out,
yeah.
and are not fulfilled. And I think one of the things what I'm hearing is you're really following your passion and really doing what you love, and that's what it
Yes.
should be about, shouldn't it?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think people are very nervous about sharing business around and sort of saying, that's not a right fit for me, but you know what? Let me put you in touch with Jenny Garrett because she'll be brilliant at that, or whoever it might be.
Yeah.
And that even in recessionary times, there is enough business out there for everybody. There is. And I think it's a credibility thing as well. You have to, your credibility is absolutely everything. And I think if you're an entrepreneur and running your own business, you have to hang on to that at all costs, because once that goes, it'd take a lifetime to get back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really helpful. So tell me, this career trajectory you've had, where have the challenges been for you?
Well, when I first started out really in the career, I think there was a little bit of guilt attached. People weren't so much in for like working mums, etc., etc.
Yes.
And I thought, do my girls really understand that I'm not just doing this for me? It's not a big ego stroke for me.
Yes.
It was a necessity.
Yes.
It was a necessity. And as they and I have both got older, I think that they do appreciate it, and they do realise that. And I think that was the challenge, getting that work-life balance.
Right.
And the other challenge was obviously working in a heavily male environment.
Yes.
Big challenge for me.
Yes.
Big challenge.
Yeah. So with regard to the work-life balance aspect of it, and sort of looking back now, and your girls being very proud of you, how did you manage that? For yourself, how did you try and how did you try and manage it?
Well, one of the things I've learnt over time is that you have to have a plan.
Yeah.
And it's something I teach, strategic and tactical business planning. And I think that you have to have goals. And for anybody out there that loves a little Google search, do look it up, because Harvard University did some research on this. And they actually found that people that had goals were in the 80% successful. People that had goals and wrote them down, that percentage increased significantly. And people that had goals, wrote them down and reviewed them, their percentage of success was enormous. So not only did I have goals in my work life, so yes, I did get a company car, because it's my plan, even though I didn't start out with one when I made the move to a client. I also had goals for the family. And I do think that is, people don't think about it. I think they just sort of let their family life drift on. But I think sometimes you do have to set time aside and plan it in. So I planned regular breaks. Even now, I will still plan my family time.
Yes.
And whether it's a Christmas shopping day with my daughter, sometimes we have things called Family Fridays,
Ah,
and where I will finish early on a Friday and we'll do something, whether it's going to the pictures or out for a meal or whatever. So it's about the planning.
yeah, so that's really useful because I do think people think about career plans, but they don't always think about the family plans. And it brings
Yeah.
back to me actually, I had some coaching years and years ago, and as the person who coached me asked me, they said to me, "You're really bright and buzzy in work. Are you the same at home?"
Ah,
And I remember him saying to me, "If you're not, is that the right balance?" And I
yeah,
remember thinking, yeah, you're absolutely right. You can give all your all to work, but and then have nothing left for home. And planning to
absolutely.
have something for home is really critical. So I love that actually, and that's given me a bit more, reminded me of that light bulb moment that I experienced.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so what about this male-dominated environment? How was it then? Because I imagine it was pretty sexist, actually. I mean, workplace can be pretty sexist now. We don't want to name names and name and shame, but people, not on purpose, actually, being a bit sexist in their behaviour.
Well, absolutely, and you've probably read on a number of blogs and
Yes.
comments that I've written on various groups that
Mm,
I do have this view, and it's a generalisation I accept, but I think on balance that when men are being assertive, they are seen as assertive. When women are being assertive, they're often seen as aggressive.
yes,
And
absolutely.
for me, it was that. I mean, I can give you a lovely example. When I went to the AA, a chap followed me around. Actually, he followed me around 3 jobs. So he was like my number two, my second in command.
Okay, he wasn't just a
And
stalker.
no, he wasn't just a stupid, lovely chap.
Okay.
And and one of the guys I had to deal with had referred to me as Lady Penelope because he thought I was a bit, demanding and being overly assertive, as
Right.
he thought. And he obviously had a bit of a thing about it. And obviously, he would chat to my male colleague and wouldn't really engage me in conversation.
Mm.
So, one of the ways I've dealt with all these things in my career is I do like to use my humour,
Ah.
but carefully, because obviously equally humour can be misunderstood. So I
Yes.
did actually phone him up one day and I said, "Oh, Parker." He's sorry. I said, "Is that Parker? It's Lady Penn here." And you know what? From that day onwards, he
Yeah.
got it. And
Yeah.
he used to phone me up and he'd go, "Lady Penn, can I talk to you about such and such?" and and it was just that little icebreaker of
Yes.
actually dealing with the elephant in the room.
Yes. Yeah. Well done
It
to
is
you. Yeah.
dealing with the elephant in the room.
Excellent, excellent. Do you think at the time that because there's a bit of a pay gap at the moment that we're identified, and that typically women get paid 82% of what a man would? Do you think you were in that same boat, or do you think that possibly you were one of the lucky ones who was getting paid what they were worth?
Oh no, I think those percentages have stood the test of time, and I
Yes,
still think that there's a pay gap.
yes.
Um, you know, I have another interesting story where we were in a management meeting talking about bonuses,
Hmm.
and they wanted to tier the bonuses, and I was the only woman in the room, and I actually said, "Why would you want to do that?
Hmm.
Surely, let's just pick a figure. Let's say everybody gets 10%."
Yes.
And of course, the senior males in the room said, "Oh, well, Trisha, we think that we contribute more to the business." And I said, "Well, because we're more senior and we're more experienced." And I said, "Well, do you know what? That may be true, but that's reflected in your salary. So
Yes.
you're technically getting 2 bites of the cherry
Yes.
because 10% of your salary to 10% of like my male colleague, my number two, is very different."
Yes. Absolutely.
I said, and it was just getting them to think about, equality equaling fair.
Mm.
And so I did have a few challenges in my time about that sort of
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
Um, Fortunately, when I was working corporately, most of it was based on grades. So you had to achieve a grade,
Right.
and the pay grade was the same whether you were male or female. But in a lot of organisations, that isn't the case. Sadly.
I'm loving talking to you, and I'm thinking, gosh, she's feisty. She's good. She wouldn't let anyone walk all over her.
No.
Where does that come from? Where, have you always been like that, or?
Well, I don't know if I ought to tell this story.
Oh,
No, I was a very shy, quiet little girl,
right.
and the story that I tell, and this is absolutely true. I went to convent school when I was very young.
Mm.
And it was when my father used to be a producer and director of the BBC, and it was
Ah,
we were moving house, and the house completion wasn't quite finished. So I boarded with my sister in this convent, and one day at school, it was very chalkboard, teaching.
yes.
So one day at school, the girl next to me spoke in class, and this nun swung round, rapped my knuckles with a ruler,
Oh,
and said, nobody speaks in my class. And I said nothing because
yes.
obviously you don't drop your friend in it.
Yes.
That was fine. The bell rung for lunchtime and we all stood up, and she swung round again and she said, now, Patricia, you can stay where you are because nobody speaks in my class.
Oh,
And at
gosh.
which point I changed for life because I turned around and said, my dad's paid for my dinner and I'm going to have it.
Oh, my goodness. That was really brave.
It
Wow.
was really brave, but there was
Yes.
obviously something inside of me that
Yes.
just snapped.
Yes.
And somebody once asked me, because I am quite a happy, bubbly person, what really gets me going.
Mm.
And I didn't have to think about it. It
Yes.
was, on the turn of a sixpence. And I sort of said, any form of unfairness, I can't
Yes.
either to myself or to
Yeah.
anybody else. I really can't abide it.
Yes.
And I think it was that was obviously a core value deep inside me, and it just hit the right button that day, or the wrong button for
Wow.
her.
Yes. Well, it was good for you. As you said, it was a bit of a turning point. So it was
Yeah,
helpful, although probably not very nice at the time. But well done. I think that's actually very, very brave thing to be able to do because you were,
yes.
all that power that they had and that you didn't. Yeah. Amazing. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. So, thinking about women rocking their role in life and work, what bits of advice would you give from your varied and extensive experience?
Well, I think obviously being yourself
Mm,
and believing in yourself.
yes.
Don't try and be somebody else that you're not. Somebody once said that to me about presentation skills.
Yes.
Sort of said, just be yourself.
Mm.
Because when you're trying to be somebody else, it just doesn't fit, does it?
No, it
You look like
doesn't.
an out of body experience.
Absolutely.
Um, obviously, have a plan, whether
Yes.
that's personal or professional. So that would be my second piece of advice.
Yes.
My third piece of advice is that, as we know, life never goes to plan.
Oh, I'm
Does
glad you said that because I was thinking, yeah, those
it?
plans,
It
best
doesn't.
laid plans. Yeah.
Doesn't. And I think it's at those times when you have to just take a breath and say, what's worked well? What hasn't worked well? What have I learnt from it?
Mm.
And what can I do now to put it back on track? And who can I go to help me? And I think that's something that I've learned along the way. Very often we will sit there and feel quite isolated and alone when things go wrong,
Mm.
instead of picking up the phone, dropping somebody an email and actually saying, give me your best advice.
Yes, yeah. Thanks for that. And why is it even women? I think sometimes we find it hard to ask each other even for help. Fair enough, we don't ask
Yes.
enough full stop for what we want, but ask each other for help. It's really interesting. Is it about pride? Do you think? Is it, what I wonder what it is that stops us asking.
Well, I think some of it is sort of depends on how you've been brought up, but
Yes.
fear of failure. And I think,
Mm,
particularly if you're running your own business, I think a lot of people think that if they ask for help, that's a sign of weakness.
yes.
Whereas for me, I think it's a sign of strength.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's a matter of switching your perception, really.
Yes.
And sort of reaching out. And I'm a great believer that nobody, and I'm quite a good creative ideas person, but nobody is the gatekeeper of good ideas.
Mm,
And the amount of times that I've sat there, I thought, gosh, I wish I'd thought of that. What a great idea that is. And sometimes it's the simplest thing because somebody will see it from a completely different perspective. And very often when you're hitting barriers or you've hit a problem or, your plan's gone off track, you can't see the wood for the trees. And just by picking up the phone or emailing somebody else, all of a sudden it's that light bulb moment, isn't it? When there is that sort of light at the end of the tunnel.
yes.
And I have no hesitation in doing that now.
And I love that. And I'd just like to repeat what you said, asking for help is a sign of strength. I think, that should, I really hope that does resonate through the airwaves and people really, really take that up. Now, the thing that you haven't mentioned is that I know you're an author as well. I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about that before, because we're nearly at the end of our interview and there's so much more I'd love to chat to you about. But please tell us about your book.
Thank you. Well, I've written a rather sort of saucy novel called
Ooh.
Soulmate.
Okay.
So please, everybody, look it up on Amazon. It's available. But the idea is that a number of my girlfriends, I'm a very much go-to person, so they would use me as a bit of a mother confessor.
We're not surprised. I'd come to you as well.
Oh, thank you. And I found that many of them were still looking for their soulmate. So what I tried to do, whilst writing this little raunchy piece about this love story and a bit of a sort of a love tryst, if you like, it's a sort of a three-pronged story, I was also trying to build in some life lessons of what people learnt along the way.
Yes.
About loyalty, deceit, all of those sorts of things, false flattery, all of those sorts of things. So there's sort of short stories within the main story, and it's about sort of learning as you go along the way. And I think that the backdrop to that is that one of my favourite books is The Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield, and it took me 3 attempts to read it, by the way. Great book. I'm not knocking another author, because great book, which is why I'm mentioning it. And but his philosophy was that everybody you meet in life, you meet for a reason.
Yes.
And you have to work out what that reason is. So my book Soulmate was about, we all experience these highs and lows when trying to find our soulmate. And this might not necessarily be a lover. It might be, a work colleague as a soulmate.
Yes.
And, what do you learn about that along the way? And I don't know about you, Jenny, or perhaps your viewers, but I think all of us have had somebody that we've regarded as a deep friend, really close friends, a soulmate, and then all of a sudden they've let them down. And you think, why did that happen? What did I learn from that? Did I do something wrong? Could I have done something better? So all of that is built into the novel. So hopefully people enjoy the raunchy read and learn something and have some sort of philosophy to think back on.
Yes. And with all those business books, because I'm thinking all these business women who are listening, they read one business book after another. We're always devouring them. But how nice to read something that's a bit of fun as well as having a lesson.
Yes.
So I think, I think that's just exactly what we need. And I'm glad you put it into that format for us. And give us a really good excuse to read something fun. So we're coming to the end of our interview. If people want to find you, how can they find you? How can they get hold of you, Trisha?
Okay. Well, they can look me up on my website, which is Partners in Solutions Limited, and see me there. Just type my name into Google and you will find me.
Okay. So just to let everyone know, it's Trisha, Trisha. Yeah.
Yes. I'm also on Twitter, which is Proud Trisha. My Soulmate novel is also on Twitter. I'm also on LinkedIn. If you send me an invite to LinkedIn, please give me a little message so I don't think you're a stalker.
No, it's great. Yes. Otherwise, it's why do you want to connect with me, isn't it? So I think that's another final tip you're leaving with everyone.
Yes.
Don't just send, sort of spam LinkedIn messages. Please put a personal message.
Yes.
I've learned so much from listening to you.
Thank you.
What's really stayed with me, I think I've learned so much more about you and your strength and your journey and your caliber. And I think also that you really want to help other people, and are you living your life according to your values. So thank you so much. I think we've all learned so much. I've really appreciated it. It's been lots of fun, and I'd love to have another 2 hours with you at least.
I love the way that you added values in there, because that is just so important. And I wish, Jenny, that you had written Rocking Your Role when I was bringing up my 2 daughters. It's a great book, and for young mums out there that are trying to also carve out a career, please read it.
Oh, thank you so much. All that's left to say is keep rocking your role in work and life, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Bye.